In this video, we're going to be baking out an ambient occlusion map for our model. So the model that we're going to be using is going to be this helicopter model. So again, really low poly, really simple. And then the unwrap over here, again, we don't have any overlapped UVs, we don't have any flipped UVs. Once those get into the picture, there's kind of some tips and tricks you can do with baking to make your life easier. But we're just doing a simple model with a simple unwrap. Nothing complicated, just so we can kind of see this process. So before we get started, I want to kind of explain what ambient occlusion is. And realistically, that's just when you look at anything in real life, there's a lot of light bouncing off of kind of everything. Light pretty much bounces off of everything. So there's spots, even if something's well lit, that it's going to get a little bit more light than other spots, and other areas are going to be a little bit more in shadow. So if we're looking at this in real life, chances are there's this little kind of inlet area that even if there's kind of a lot of light on this thing, it's going to most likely be a little bit darker up in here than it's going to be kind of over here. And same thing, looking at this right here, kind of what we have is little areas like right here. This is, even if this effectively surface is the same color as this surface in almost all cases would be a little bit darker, just because again it's in a smaller enclosed area, so not as much light is going to be able to get in there. So let's get started with this process. So what we need to do is grab our final color and duplicate it. So now we have final color output 1 and 2. The second one, I'm just going to left click on final color or hit this little down arrow, go to lighting, and choose ambient occlusion. So now my mesh is selected, my UVs are showing up over here because they're selected right here, and our ambient occlusion render output is in there. So what we're going to do is turn off that final color output, because again, that rendering as well is just going to take longer. Render, bake to render outputs, and let's see what this looks like. So again, it bakes out fairly clean, and it's kind of a black and white map. It's a little hard to read on here, so I'll just save this out. We'll just call it testao.png, save that to my desktop. And let's go ahead and apply this. So again, we already have our texture. Its name is helicopter, so we're just going to grab this testao image and just apply it right now as a kind of as a texture. So this is getting applied as our diffuse or our color texture. And then over here, depending on if you're on default, I would just switch it to texture, because again, then this will come up in an unlit state so we can see just the texture. And the other thing, the wireframe is kind of interacting or fighting with what I'm trying to see. So I'm going to hold Control and 1, hover over toggle wireframe, and let go of Control and 1. It gets rid of our wireframe. Now we can really look at this and see what's going on here. So, as expected over here, areas that are a little bit more kind of in shadow are now darker. Areas like the top here that would be having more light hit them are a little bit lighter. And even areas like this on the bottom, there's really no things kind of floating here that would kind of cast a subtle shadow right here. So again, we're getting kind of subtle shadows cast right here and here, but not any on our direct surfaces. And again, this one, if we look at it from straight down, it's getting a little bit of shadow from this and this in a sense, because again, if there's two things that are kind of close to each other, they're going to be effectively blocking some of the lights that bounce back and forth. These actually are coming in black. Let's see why. So over here, these actually aren't unwrapped. So that was just an error on my part. So we'll end up rebaking this. So let's just unwrap those, unwrap right click. And these I'll just scale down just so we're not changing our UVs too much. I'll just kind of Tetris these in where they fit. So this one can go right here, and this one can go right here. Again, usually with the AO, if I see something black like this that's getting called out, that's probably an error on my part. So with that, there's also a little, yep, it looks like this little polygon here didn't get unwrapped. So let's unwrap that as well. Unwrap right click, and these ones are really, really little. So I can scale these down quite a bit. And let's just have these oriented where they need to be. And again, this is a process. It's not kind of a one button solution and you're done. So just know that sometimes you got to make changes to these things. There we go. We'll just leave those right there. Again, not really changing the rest of the unwrap. So let's go ahead and hide some things and see how things got affected. Or let's actually just move them. So I'm going to grab this and move it up. So you can see what happened is this area is where that helicopter blade is kind of hitting. And you can see an outline there. So sometimes you can touch these things up. Same thing here. This area is where this geometry is intersecting. Same thing with this. We can kind of see a faint kind of ring that goes around where this guy's sitting. Again, not a big deal. Just kind of seeing how this process works. Let's grab just this little piece and move it out and see what's happening. So again, yeah, where this little plane right here is getting cut in, it's affecting that light. So realistically, this light bake is okay. I'm sorry, this ambient occlusion bake is not a light bake. But let's zoom in on this. And again, depending on the quality of the video, this right here is really, really grainy. We usually don't want that grainy look to things. I mean, sometimes you do. But let's go ahead and get rid of this. So there's a few baking options that we'll go over. The first one is, realistically, we're unsure what texture size got saved out. So to change your texture size when that gets kind of baked out, so if I hit this little render globe, go to properties, and I'm in this little frame right here. Let's hit this little more button. All the way down at the bottom, you have this baking and bake width and bake height. So right now it's set to 1024 by 1024 or 1K texture. We're just going to leave it at that, but if you ever need to change your texture size, just know that it's in here. So again, blue render globe, frame, all the way towards the bottom is baking. And again, you'll probably recognize this blue render globe if we're rendering out our image, our frame height and width. So this is our frame from the camera is going to be here. So again, those are just two separate values. So the next thing that we'll look at real quick is going to be getting rid of that graininess. So to do that, we just click on our ambient occlusion. We're in the properties tab, render output. Let's hit this little more button. And the thing you want is this little guy right here. It's called occlusion raise. It's right now it's set to 64. So let's bump that up to something like 512, just kind of arbitrarily making it larger. And the other thing to note, just like kind of the other things we've dealt with lighting, if I increase the number of rays or the amount of light beams kind of shooting out, it's going to take a little bit longer to render out. So we have these few areas fixed. So here's fixed, here's fixed. Hopefully this graininess is going to be fixed. So let's zoom right in on this so we can see the process. And again, our mesh is selected, our UVs are present, ambient occlusion is over here and turned on, so render, bake to render outputs. And again, this bake is going to take a little bit longer, but our results are going to be a little better. So we'll just let this do its thing. And again, up here, depending on how big your render window is, this will give you a little estimate. So it says less than a minute, 70% done, it's currently baking. So after a little bit, this will be done. And we'll go ahead and hit save image. And we'll just save over that test AO. Actually, let's call this one helicopter AO. Leave that as a PNG. And this is just so I can have these to compare. So I have this one. Let's go ahead and grab our helicopter AO and apply that one as well. So technically this will have two textures applied. So I just want to put the helicopter AO above the test AO. And now you can see the difference here. So again, this one, our original bake is on right now. It's really grainy. The new bake, not so grainy. So again, kind of a cool scenario. This one's going to look a little bit better. And over here, these guys are now looking better as well. So this is probably a good bake. So one other thing I want to bring up is that padding scenario. So again, this rendered out, and then you saw that little pop of pixels. And again, you can see those stretching across here. If you ever need to increase or decrease that padding again, go to System Preferences, or if you're on a Mac, it'd be all the way over to the left, Modo Preferences. And then what we're going to do is go all the way down to Final Rendering, and you have this Bake UV border size. Mine's set at 16 pixels. You can increase that or decrease that. And again, what that's going to do is open a render window. Let's just zoom in on this. So right here, even right here, this will work. So our edge was actually right here and about right here. So it's just going to take these pixels and send them out this way, take these pixels and send them out this way. And then when they collide, it'll stop. Or in this case, they'll just go out that number of pixels. So in this case, 16, and then it'll stop. And then the rest is just going to be filled in with black. So the next thing you can do if you want to, this one's a little bit optional, is I could kind of hide these pieces, bring up my paint tools. Let's just use the paintbrush. Again, I can right click to change the brush size, middle mouse click. You can see over here we're at 0.9, middle mouse click 0.97. That's just color picking. But I can color pick this and paint right on the surface and kind of touch up anything that you don't think really looks all that right. So for this process, you can either middle mouse click to color pick and then kind of paint a lower opacity. You could use the smudge brush, the blur brush, kind of any of this stuff to make your life a little bit easier and make your kind of black and white version of this look how you want it to look. So now we need to go into how to use this ambient occlusion bake to make our textures look better. So what we need to do is save this out. Again, if we've modified this and painted on it in any way, we need to go to our Images tab, right click on this, and then save it out. If we just rendered it and we're fine with how it looked and we saved it out, we could just go directly to the source, so in this case our desktop. So let's go ahead and throw that image right inside Photoshop. That's just called Helicopter AO. This is that image. So in a previous video we had made the base color, but again this would be, if you didn't see the previous video, this scenario would just be create the base colors in any way you see fit. So again, we just have some basic browns and grays in here with some colors for the lights. So now realistically what I want to do is I want to incorporate these two images together. So the faster way of doing this that I don't think looks as good in most cases is to just throw the image, the ambient occlusion bake, on top of the base color. So let's just name this base color and just call this AO. Is just to grab this AO and set it to a multiply layer. So what this is going to do is, if we look at the normal, it's going to take all the white and effectively erase it. So again, we don't have to do anything fancy at all. Oops, not darken, multiply. We don't have to do anything fancy at all. Everything kind of gets done for us, but again, it's a little bit of a weird way of doing it, in my opinion, just because again, this right here, this darkened area is going to be applied as black. So again, sometimes shadows can be black. So let's take a look and just see what this looks like. So we'll just call this helicopter multiply, and we'll just save that to our desktop. And now we'll apply this image directly as a texture. So again, we already have these applied, so we're just going to put this next one right on top. So again, it's the one that shows up first. So again, effectively, we can pretend like these don't exist. We can delete them out, turn them off. It doesn't really matter. We're just focusing on this one. So again, looking at this now, what we can see is it's kind of combining the AO, where again, you can focus on this. There's kind of some dark areas right here. Now turn the color on. Now there's some dark areas as well. So this is just a really easy way to kind of make your textures look a little bit better. And again, this wouldn't be kind of a finalized texture in most cases. This would be something that this would be a starting point that you could then start adding details and whatnot. So let's jump back into Photoshop. So again, I would have a working PSD that would kind of have this layer as a separate layer, this AO layer that you could turn on and off. Maybe I don't need it to be this intense, so I can drop the opacity a little bit, so now it's not as intense. But again, that's something I'll leave up to you. But again, I just recommend keeping a working PSD that has all these layers. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a different way of applying this instead of using this multiply layer. So let's go back to our original ambient occlusion black and white image. So what we're going to be doing is a process where we're going to remove all of the white pixels in the file, which seems a little weird, but you'll kind of get the hang of it once we get going. And again, this is a process that I would recommend if you use it often, make a macro. So again, I have a little macro over here, but we're just going to do it from scratch. The first thing I'm going to do is this backdrop image. I'm just going to double click this and just turn it into a non-flattened image. And then the image type, just for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to change it to RGB color. So what we're going to do is we effectively need to grab all the white pixels and delete them and leave all the black pixels. And you can't really use a magic wand or anything like that. We have to do this in a different way because technically the gray areas have some white-ish pixels in there, and we want to have those medium levels as well. So how we're going to do this is we're going to select everything on the canvas and copy it. So you can either marquee select and make sure you get absolutely every pixel, so it says 1024 by 1024, I have all of them. Or what you can do is hold Control and hit A, and that's going to grab all your pixels. Then you can Control C or edit copy if you hate hotkeys. Then I'm going to go into the channels, and this normally has my RGB channels. I'm going to hit New Layer, and I'm going to hit Paste. And now I can just deselect what's going on. So now kind of the same thing that's in my RGB channels is in this alpha channel. So what happens if we hold Control and we click on the thumbnail of this alpha? What's going to happen is it's going to select all the white pixels in this scene. So what we're going to do is we don't effectively want to keep the white pixels, we want to delete those. So I'm going to actually have this alpha selected, hold Control and hit I to invert, or you can do edit invert. So again, Control I will invert your image. So now all the black pixels are white, all the white pixels are black. So now if I hold Control and tap on this background or this thumbnail right here, it's going to grab all the white pixels, which remember the white pixels used to be black. Now we go back over to the layers, hit New Layer, and now we have black and white. And we're just going to go ahead and do a Alt backspace or fill with our foreground color. Now if I turn this background layer off, it's our original layer, now our result is just black pixels. So let's do that process again. I'm going to go ahead, delete this image. Now we have just our black and white. I'm going to delete this alpha. So again, I'm going to do this process a little bit faster now. We have everything we need. The ambient occlusion is now how it was originally baked out. Select all of the pixels, copy, channels, New Layer, paste, Control I to invert, Control D to deselect. You don't really have to do that one. But then Control tap on this little thumbnail of the image. That's going to grab all the white pixels that again used to be black. Layers, new, oops, not group. Layers, new, Alt backspace to fill with the foreground color. And then from here I can just delete this guy out. Now I have, again, just the black pixels of what's going on in this image. Let's grab this and apply it to our image. And again, I'm having this snap right down. So if you're unfamiliar with that process, I can either copy paste it in here, or I can click and drag and start moving this up. Hold the Shift key, go over here, still holding Shift, let go of click, and it just snaps right into place. Again, they're the same size, so it's not really a big deal. So now we have AO, I'm just going to put Alt because this is an alternate way of doing it. And now let's turn both of these off. So turning all three off, we have this AO that's set to multiply. And again, it has the white pixel, so as soon as I have a layer under it, it's going to show up and look like this. So again, oops, let's change that to a vivid light on accident. So this is just a good area to display this. All these pixels come in, you only see the black, and then we have the white pixels you just can't see. So let's turn this layer off, turn this one on, and realistically, if I toggle between these, at this point they look the same. But here's where the difference is. This is my AO alt, so this only has the black pixels. I'm going to set it to a soft light. So now what you can see is instead of this shadow being black and desaturating my original color, it's actually staying in the brown family and just being a darker brown. So again, this is the alternate way of doing it. This is the faster multiply way of doing it. Again, I really don't recommend this way. It kind of desaturates your textures and looks a little bit weird. Even if you set this to a low opacity, it's still gonna be changing your colors quite a bit. Again, sometimes that's desired though. So again, alternate way, easy way. So I'll let you choose kind of what one you prefer. Again, this one overall, it just feels like a warmer texture. This one, again, a lot more subdued and black. So alternatively, just if you're curious, if I was to grab this guy and set it to a soft light, what's going to happen is the white is negatively affecting what's going on. So again, this is the black and white AO set to a soft light. This is the just black AO set to a soft light. So again, quite a bit of a difference there. I mean, you could overcompensate for this by potentially taking this and making it really dark and then saturating it. And in that realm, you can start to get a similar scenario. But again, it's kind of a weird way of doing it. But I'll leave that up to you. So let's have this alternate way selected. I'm going to save this out. So desktop, we have our helicopter multiply. So I'm just going to call this helicopter alt. ALT. Hit save. And now let's apply this alternate way as a texture real quick. And again, we're just going to throw this on top so it kind of overrides all the other ones. So again, this one is looking a lot softer everywhere. Again, this is just opinion based. I think this one looks significantly better than this guy right here, because again, you can see this. It's really desaturating a lot of things, where this is just kind of enhancing your colors. So again, we have, at this point, we just have the base color on here. Boom, boom. And we have that AO bake. And now with no lighting, we're really seeing what's happening with all the forms here. It's just reading really well. So again, this is just kind of another layer you can add to your textures, no pun intended, to make your textures feel a little bit more alive. So again, just like I stated before, I'd recommend keeping a working PSD file that has all these layers in it, so you can kind of actively come in here, change these opacities, maybe even duplicate this if it's not intense enough. But again, I'll leave that one up to you.